naso. So we return to Vipashyana territory today. And there's going to be a theme that runs throughout the rest of Panchen Rinpoche's discussion of emptiness, both the emptiness of individuals, of persons, and of all other kinds of phenomena. And that's the distinction between the basis of designation, basis, it's a technical term, and we'll learn them and then they're useful. I'm just like giving you a tool, like a fork or a knife. You know exactly what it means and then you can use it. And these are very useful tools. And so, basis of designation and designated object. Sometimes called basis of imputation, imputed object, fine, either one is fine. And the central theme that runs through this prasangika madhyamaka, as articulated by Panchen Rinpoche and many, many others, is that these two, for any given entity, are never the same. They're never identical. Never identical. So, for example, I can look over at Mary Kay, and I see the front side of her body. Actually, I see a little bit of body, mostly clothing. And the clothing is not Mary Kay, and the face is not Mary Kay. But I say, oh yeah, Mary Kay's right there, right? And I could describe her. Oh, she's fairly tall, and so forth. What I'm looking at, that is the basis of designation there, is one can say her body, a bit more precisely, the front side of her body, a bit more precisely, the visual appearance of the front side of her body. Okay? But none of those three are a person. Certainly not Mary Kay or anybody else. A visual appearance, which is arising in the space of my mind, that's not a person. The front side of her body isn't even a body. And even her body isn't a person. But I can say, is Mary Kay, is she in the room right now? And with total certainty, I'd say, yeah, she's right there. Yeah. And so on the basis of that, on that basis of designation, then I designate a person, Mary Kay, right? But they're not identical. They're not identical. Now, I could be walking around the corner and hear Mary Kay's voice. Like she could be speaking with someone and recognizing the voice. Say, oh, Mary Kay's right around the corner. Michelle might say, do you know if Mary Kay's around? They say, oh yeah, I know she's right around the corner. I heard her speak. Well, I didn't even see her, but her voice is distinctive enough that on the basis of her voice, I impute an agent who is speaking, and on that basis, then I impute a person, but her voice is not a person. Right? Now, if Mary Kay had a dog, dogs have a very good sense of smell, of course, and they will recognize many, many things by the scent. Just the scent of this person, that person, and they're very good at it. So if Mary Kay were coming home and her dog is eagerly awaiting her, he or she might first pick up the scent and then think in dog language, oh, Mary Kay's home. On the basis of scent, scent. Like that. And so you can see, if Mary Kay and I were exploring a tunnel together, and then I'm not quite where she was, and I reach out and I touch her shoulder. Oh, you're there, good. I thought maybe I'd lost you, And so on the basis of tactile sensation, or that, right, firmness, earth element, I said, oh, there you are. And she said, yeah, there I am. Yeah, I'm here. And she taps me back on the shoulder, right? And so none of these things are a person, but each of those is legitimate. These are valid bases of designation. Touch, scent, sight, sound, and so forth. Yeah. But then Mary Kay may be sitting quietly and observing her own mind, and she might, in the course of her meditation, which we're going to soon begin, she might just quite naturally and accurately think, I'm getting a bit bored, or I'm a bit agitated, or my mind is wandering, I'm getting distracted, I'm really enjoying this, I'm having so many memories, and so on and so on. And in each of those cases where the word I is coming up, you can examine, is the I that is designated, I, Mary Kay, is that identical to or different from that upon which that sense of I is imputed or designated? For example, if an unpleasant feeling comes up, I feel badly, but I'm not a feeling. I desire a bit of water, I'm getting thirsty, but I'm not the desire. I want some water, but I'm not the desire, and so forth and so on. So body parts, all of 5 senses, any type of mental activity. On the basis of these, we may quite legitimately, quite accurately, meaningfully say I. Right? And yet in none of those cases is the basis of designation actually a person? Now that's true for everything else, which is quite remarkable. So I want to wrap this up because I want to get back to meditation, back to the text. But you remember in the early phases, kind of like I think the first week or two, in the scene, let there be just a scene, in the herd, just the herd. That famous, I think we're all very, very familiar with that. And that very basic kind of foundational Vipashyana, so crucial, and very much in tune with the Sautrantika view, and very much in tune with the foundational teachings and the four close applications of mindfulness. You recall? That bringing out that razor, very practically, very down home where we live, and distinguishing what's reality dishing up, what's simply being presented in the scene, there being just the scene, and so forth, the tactile, the auditory, the mental, and then what's being projected upon that, such as imputing more permanence than is in fact there, imputing or projecting some sense of this makes me happy, this landscape makes me very happy. Well, that means I just, anytime I open my eyes, I'll just have happiness coming up every time, if it's the source of happiness, right? And so imputing sources of happiness, of sukha, upon appearance, that's a projection. And of course, I and mind, the three marks of existence. And so we did that before. It's really, really useful, very, very practical in daily life. And now we're in that same continuum. We're just taking it from the, let's say, the Pali Canon to the Prajnaparamita, to Madhyamaka. And so we have these so-called bases of imputations arise. And then upon them we designate, we impute, or we project that which wasn't there already, but we do so. And then what happens, and that's perfectly fine, just very casually with no reification. Brendan may ask, is Mary Kay around? Have you seen her? I said, oh yeah, she's right over there. That's not a delusional question or a delusional answer at all. There's no problem there at all, right? And two Arya Bodhisattvas could have that conversation. She'd still be over there, right? It's fine, as long as we know what's going on. There's one statement from the sutras where I think it's the Tathagata, the Buddha, was referred to as being saying that the Tathagata uses words but is not fooled by them. Something to that effect, very close. So is Mary Kay there? Yeah, she's right over there. Yeah. But knowing how light, how feathery, how non-substantial that is, not conflating the Mary Kay with that upon which I'm imputing her, which is never Mary Kay. So I'd like to bring this down home to our own practice. But it's helpful to have something there, very tangible. There's a person, and none of us seriously doubt that she's here. So that's good. And then the question is ontology, and that is, in what manner is she here? She appears to be existing from her own side. Now that's a way of existing. She really is there from her own side, and she, this individual, is displaying her properties of her body, her form, her voice, her scent, and so forth and so on. But she's really there from her own side. That would be a mode of existence. That's how she is. She's really there, and she bears her own attributes. And I'm here as a metaphysical realist, mapping what is the nature of the true Mary Kay who's already there. Let me write her biography. Let me take many photos. Let me get a very thorough account so I can represent the Mary Kay that's already there. Right? That's metaphysical realism. Right? Most of science, but as we've seen, not all of science, is exactly after that. There's a universe out there. It already happened. It started 13.8 billion years ago, or 7,000 years ago, whichever story you like. But it was already out there. And now the scientist comes in and said, well, let's find out what's really out there, and we'll develop our theories and get better and better, more and more complete, more and more accurate and precise maps that represent what's already out there, knowing that finally, if we ever complete this process, there will be one true map that accurately represents the one true reality that's absolutely out there, including big asteroids. Right? That's metaphysical realism. Most of science is fueled by that, very understandably. It's not stupid. It's really not stupid at all. The Theravada interpretation of the Pali Canon, by and large, it's saturated by metaphysical realism. It's not stupid at all. It may be mistaken, but it's not foolish. It's not foolish. And it takes a razor-sharp sword of Vipashyana, of Prajna, of the perfection of wisdom, of Nagarjuna, and so forth, to cut through these appearances. Or, and there's one way of doing it, or the other way is get 400 years of physics under your belt and see where quantum mechanics and quantum cosmology takes you. And lo and behold, it really does look like there's a profound convergence there. So, how to relate this to the practice? I will give a guided meditation, but I'd like to front load it so I don't need to overburden you with my interventions into the practice. And that is what I like to do here is, of course, settle body, speech, and mind, ground a bit, and then turn to the Shamatha practice of taking the mind as a path, or the Shamatha practice of settling the mind as natural state. Okay? That's different than simply the culmination of settling body, speech, and mind in natural state. I never really clarified that, but I should right now, really briefly. That culmination of settling body, speech, and mind is simply coming to rest with no object, ready to go, but just resting in stillness, and then ready to do whatever you want to do, or just stay there as you like. That's the culmination of settling body, speech, and mind. And then there's the shamatha practice of settling body, speech, and settling the mind in its natural state. And that's where you are attending to 1 out of 6 domains of experience, the space of the mind and whatever arises in it. And then you take that all the way to the substrate. Okay? So it's the same term, sem-nilubhava, settling mind in its natural state. One is simply a culmination of the preliminary, preparatory practice. And the other one is for the long haul, weeks, months, or years, until your mind has settled in its natural state. And what that means is it's melted, become deconfigured, and your coarse mind is dissolved into subtle mind. And all you're left with is the substrate consciousness aware of the substrate, and reflexively of itself. So I didn't clarify that before, hopefully, and it's very easy to confuse. Same term, but used for different things that are related but not identical. Okay? So what I'd like to do now, again coming back to the forthcoming meditation, is having settled body, speech, and mind, then take the mind onto the path, as usual, focusing on the space of the mind, whatever arises within it, and knowing full well that will include appearances arising to the mind. The soundtrack is very common. Imagery, like some comparable to visual imagery, is very common. So appearances will arise, images. But of course there will also be these subjective impulses, desires, feelings, thoughts, and so forth. The thinking process and so forth. Emotions and so on. And so as those are arising, we're not going to just settle with shamatha, because we're now into Vipashyana territory. But the shamatha is the basis for the shamatha is basis for Vipashyana. The stronger the shamatha is, the stronger your Vipashyana can be. If the shamatha is weak, your Vipashyana will never be strong. It's just the way it is. It's Karma Chagmé. It just said what's true. And so, as we are resting in the shamatha, then we bring out that discerning intelligence, that mode of inquiry. And I invite you here then to ask, whenever there arises a sense of self, of I, anything, and a memory of your own appearance may come up. Oh, I'm putting on a bit of weight. Like that, just for example, I am getting a bit chubby. I'm. Okay, I am. Okay. I'm imputing myself on a mental image of my body, which has probably 10 to 20 pounds more than I really need. Right? So I'm getting chubby, right? Or I'm getting old, blah, 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 like that. Based on an appearance. Or one may have a recollection of one's voice, other appearances, and one may impute oneself upon the basis of appearances arising in the space of the mind. It's very easy to do. Especially when memories come up. Oh, then I was feeling so happy, or oh, I really like that person so much, and I. Imputed upon appearances arising in the mind. The appearances are not you. They're basis of designation of you. They're not you, right? But then also, up close and very, very personal, are the subjective impulses that come up. The desires, the feelings, the thinking process, I think, therefore I am the thinker, I'm thinking this, and imputing myself upon this, and so forth. So see if you can discern. This takes a sharp knife. As a sense of I arises relative to some appearances arising in the mind, or a sense of I arises relative to some subjective impulse in the mind, see if you can identify what's the basis of imputation, or the basis of designation, and the self that is designated upon that. Just doing that is not delusional, any more than if I say, Just like, yeah, there's Mary Kay, or I'm speaking. It's not delusional at all, of course, it's true. We designate, but then the tendency, the overwhelmingly deeply ingrained tendency, is to reify that which designated. So we designate, and then stand off, like, who, me? I didn't do that. As if now, suddenly, we're passive. That that's already Mary Kay. Mary Kay is, blah, blah, blah. That we impute that designated object, and then, not even noting that we did it, we just see it as out there, as if our awareness of it is completely passive. As if this is not a participatory event, but a purely witnessing event. Right? Now this really, really strikes home when we have judgments, for example, about other people. If I can just make a brief foray here, I'll try to be very polite, but it looks like Donald Trump is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party to become Commander-in-Chief. And so I saw a photo of him, and I had a very strong designation come up. Really, really strong. Like, I'm just witnessing that this person is such and such, that he has this quality. This is an expression of such and such. And if all 7 billion human beings were all looking, they'd all agree with me. If God exists, God would agree with me. If all the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate kalpa looked, they would agree, yes, Alan, you got it right. It feels that way. And if anybody disagrees, I'm sorry, you're delusional. I got this one right. I absolutely got this one right, As if I'm simply witnessing, And there is no process of designation. That this person is inherently, and I'm not going to put him down. He doesn't need that from me, you don't need that from me. But just this person is inherently, and then you fill in the adjective, whatever feels suitable. Yeah. But it won't be the same. His wife, his daughter, his friends, and so forth, his supporters. It looks like a majority of Republicans want to have him as president. That's a lot of people. So far, anyway. But to watch that, and I'm taking kind of an obvious example, he's a big media person right now. That too will pass. But it's all the time that we're making these evaluations that we feel are not evaluations. No, that wasn't my evaluation, I just observed that. And it's for people, it's for situations, it's places, things, all kinds of things. That's not my evaluation, that's not my opinion. That's what I observed. That's what I observed. And that's where the reification comes in. It already was as I apprehended it. And my role here is simply the passive witness. That's delusional. And then, of course, we can get fierce disagreements. I mean, there have been clashes. There have been these, these real, some violence in the demonstrations for and against Mr. Trump. And each side is persuaded that they're perceiving this man in the correct way, and that the other hand is simply delusional, and they should be silenced. They should be suppressed. They shouldn't be able to do this. These people they got it wrong, and therefore they shouldn't have a vote. They should be swept to the side. We should drown them out. We shouldn't let them speak because they're wrong, because we know our perspective is right. Well, how long has that been going on? And so then, so far it's just been a skirmish here and there. But when we consider world wars throughout all of history, it's always comes down to that. We have the right perspective. And if you're different from us, you're wrong. So we'll have to suppress you, kill you, silence you, overwhelm you, like that. So when it says that this reification, it sounds like this esoteric, abstract philosophical term that could only be of interest to people who are concerned with metaphysical realism. But it turns out reification is at the root of all mental afflictions. Craving, hostility, the whole shebang. It's said in the Madhyamaka that any mental affliction that arises of any of the 84,000 kinds, or all the different lists the Buddhists have of primary and secondary mental afflictions, they all, for them to launch and have power, they are all rooted in delusion. And it's the delusion of reification, the delusion of dualistic grasping. So the stakes are actually very, very high. This is absolutely not a matter simply of interest to philosophers. Or if it is, it's really a shame, because this is really core to the suffering that we experience from day to day as individuals, communities, nations, and so forth and so on. So to shine a bright light on the nature of the delusional process itself, to see how we do impute a designated object upon a basis of designation, that we are participants in this reality, filled with objects of our own making, how we impute and then how we reify, and on the basis of reification, then very easily feel hostility for this group, and attachment for this group, attachment for my side, aversion to the other side. Then we see, oh, this is a high-stakes game. This is significant. Okay? Oh, not so. So that was a lot of front load. Hopefully now I can use very few words and just like throwing darts at a dartboard. Just be very concise. So please find a comfortable position. We'll go in. Oh, not so. So I'd like to make a brief interlude before returning to the text. Again, providing glue, my intention, to really merge together, integrate the practices that we're doing here on a daily basis and these rather advanced teachings of a very, very deep Vipashyana practice. And for that I wanted to return to a story that I have to say my memory was kind of vague, because if I remember correctly, the last time I heard the story was when Geshe Taige told it, the story of Milarepa and the demons. And if that's a lot, and I think he was the only one I heard it from, and if so, I heard it about 44 years ago. So, memory is a bit wobbly. Taught it in the Lamrim. The book, his book, The Tibetan Tradition of Mental Development, those were my class notes that were edited, so they'll be there. If it's in there, it'll be in that book, yeah. So, but back to the story of Milarepa, and so I checked it out. And it's a good story. It's even better than what I gave. But what I gave, I was happy to see it was not incorrect. But we'll see how this relates to our practice here, of the settling the mind as natural state, and to the teachings on emptiness. Good to weave these together, integrate them, yeah? So here's the story. I found the most definitive source I could find on the internet. The most definitive would be to go to his, definitive biography. But this, I think, is pretty good. I think this strikes me as authentic. So here's the story. One day Milarepa returned with firewood to his cave. This is not too long after Marpa, his guru, had given him the full empowerment, oral transmission, explanations, fully launched him, gave him all the teachings he needed, teachings, empowerment, and so forth, to launch him into long-term solitary retreat, basically going to retreat until you're enlightened. So Milarepa gave him everything he needed, yeah? And so Milarepa was up there in his cave, and of course he had obstacles. He had good days and bad days, apparently. Strange thing. And one day, and he had a fierce storm that was quite upsetting, but one day Milarepa returned with firewood to his cave and found it invaded by 5 horrific demons with eyes as large as saucers. Shocked, Milarepa politely introduced himself. Such a gentleman, and asked them to leave. That's very courteous. People show up uninvited as guests in your home. You say, well, hello, my name's Alan. Would you please go? Pacifying, right? First, you tried that one. Would you please go? Maybe you came to the wrong address. At this, the demons became menacing, surrounding him while growling, grimacing, and laughing maliciously. They sound like street thugs. So Milarepa was alarmed and attempted the most powerful of exorcism recitations, to no avail. So try to, just get them, go, please, go. But to no avail. The demons became even more threatening. Okay. So next, the yogin tried with great compassion to pacify them with Buddhist teachings. So give them some of the second mode, enrich them. Give them a Dharma talk. That'll do it, Enrich their understanding with a compassionate motivation. How about the Four Noble Truths, But they still remained more vivid and horrible than before. I guess they didn't like his Dharma talk. Finally, Milarepa realized that his approach was mistaken and that he needed the most direct means possible. Having proclaimed the fearlessness with which he had discovered in his practice, Milarepa followed the training given him by his guru. He invited the demons to stay with him and to receive his hospitality. So, gave up the whole notion of banishing them. Said, stay, hang out. Now, that's where some versions of the story stop. They stop too soon. The story's not finished. If we stop right there, this sounds eerily similar to kind of the mindfulness movement in its less intelligent manifestations. And that is, whatever comes up, don't exercise any judgment whatsoever. Mental afflictions, wholesome, unwholesome, no judgment, and don't judge yourself, for heaven's sakes. And don't question anything, just be non-judgmental, be accepting of whatever comes up in your mind stream, and be comfortable in the company of your mental afflictions. If people find it helpful, I'm glad they find it helpful. That's not Buddhism. That's not Buddhism. That is not even remotely Buddhism. To get comfortable with your mental afflictions, and then to go on and say this is the essence of Buddhist meditation without the Buddhism, is not only false, but it's really profoundly misleading. And so it's not that. That's not Buddhist meditation at all. It's more just status quo. But being more comfortable with your mental afflictions than you were before. But the notion you'll ever be free of them that way is simply absurd. So it's really unfortunate then if one stops the story there, because it seems to reinforce, well, just get friendly with your mental afflictions. They're not that bad after all. You're only human, what do you expect? Human beings have craving and lust and greed and jealousy, but we're only human, so just kind of be comfortable with that. And for heaven's sakes, I've read this a number of times in the media, don't strive for perfection. You'll never achieve that. That's really wrong. Don't strive for perfection, and be real, accept your limitations, accept your mental afflictions. Just go, get comfortable, enjoy life, okay? That's okay. If people find that helpful, I guess so. But that's not even remotely Buddhism. But he invited the demons to stay with him and receive his possibility. Now, here I recall very vividly, it's from Dzogchen Rinpoche. He uses another metaphor for settling the mind in its natural state. It's very nice. I remembered it from years ago. He said, be the gracious host in the midst of unruly guests. Okay? I think we all understand exactly what that means. So the gracious host, of course, is the stillness of your own awareness, not glomming onto, not fighting with or becoming attached to or identifying with any of the unruly guests of whatever arises in your mind, which is all kinds of things. But being the gracious host in the midst of unruly guests, just being present, but without the cognitive fusion, just being present. So it seems like, okay, he did that, right? Because he said, I welcome you to stay. In other words, I'm not letting you go, I'm letting you be in the space of my mind, these 5 demons with eyes as big as saucers. But he didn't, and let me, receive hospitality. So really, so far, this sounds like Shamatha. It sounds like Shamatha. I'm just going to rest in stillness and hang out, make yourself comfortable, whatever. But that's not where the story ends. He also challenged them to a friendly contest of teachings. A bit like Geshe-Ngam Taige, this great big grin. That's truly a friendly contest. Because they're really contesting, they're really debating, they're definitely competing. But it's joyful, it's friendly, and it's very, very sharp. Razor sharp, and it's very fast. See, 2 accomplished meditators, they do not sit back and say, let me think about that for a while. Everybody just bursts into laughter. They burst into laughter. It's got to be sharp, it's kind of like too dualish. It just doesn't stop. Very snappy. So here it is, we've seen this. He also challenged to a friendly contest of teachings. And then he addresses them, ye ghosts and demons, enemies of the Dharma, I welcome you today. It is my pleasure to receive you. I pray you, stay, do not hasten to leave. We will discourse and play together. Although you would be gone, stay the night. And then he says, we will pit the black against the white Dharma and see who plays the best. Before you came, you vowed to afflict me. Shame and disgrace would follow if you returned with this vow unfulfilled. So he's invited into a contest. Right? Now bear in mind, before he ever met Marpa, he was an accomplished sorcerer. That's how he was able to do his nefarious deeds, killing all those people. He had to have pretty darn good samadhi for that. And he was a wielder of the dark arts. I accept that literally. And so in that case, where he killed these 35 people who had treated his own family so badly, especially his uncle, he was using ferocity, he was using wrath. And he used it, directing his wrath, his ferocity, his destructive ability, he used that against people, sentient beings. And he intended to cause misery, and he did. On one occasion, this is also a very old memory, but as he went about, it was really like, it's actually very sinister. Because he, using his abilities, this dark magic, it's not magic though, just these dark abilities, he wiped out the crops, the material possessions of his uncle and aunt, who were his primary targets. And then he killed all the rest of them. That would be 35 people or so. He killed all their kinsmen. And he left them standing. He left them unscathed. This is really very sinister. There's no happy smile on this one. He wiped them out financially, killed off all their relatives, all their loved ones, and left these two. And his intention was, now may you live the rest of your days in bitterness and grief. And now this is how I get back at you for what you did to my family. It was sheer revenge, very malevolent. So he took the power of his mind, the powers that he had acquired through this other teacher, and he directed his ferocity, his wrath, his hatred, his malevolence, and he created great misery. Right? He still knew how to do that. When he started with Marpa, he didn't have amnesia. He still knew how to exercise those black arts. But now he's under an enlightened master rather than another kind. So now these 5 demons were appearing, and he knows that, he's got a mafioso background. He knows how to do mass murders. He knows that he has this ability. But now these are not 5 people that came in. These are 5 demonic apparitions coming in, right? And he's challenging them, white against black, the dark side, the bright side. So now it's much more interesting, isn't it? Then they all just left happily ever after, and they played house with the rest of their lives with the mental afflictions, and they all just got really cozy and watched soap operas together. Okay, I find that kind of a boring ending. So he says, although you would be gone, maybe you feel a little bit, like I want you to go, stay the night. We will pit the black against the dark. We'll pit the dark side against the white side, and see who plays the best. Before you came, you vowed to afflict me. Shame and disgrace would follow if you returned with his vow unfulfilled. And so he was reserving the last mode of enlightened activity as the one that still could be used. He tried pacifying, he tried enriching, he tried power, and they're still there. And clearly he does want them to leave. He wants to be in solitary retreat, not have 5 housemates. So the last mode of enlightened activity, ferocity, is the final resort for an accomplished yogin like Milarepa. He did this with a challenge: we will pit the black against the white dharma and see who plays best. And here he is referring to the black magic and sorcery of his past training, his central shadow directly confronted by the white magic of Buddhism, which can accommodate and purify the black. So this is Vajrayana. You're taking that malevolence. Look at Vajrayana, look at Yamantaka, look at Mahakala, look at Pandalamo. These are ferocious. They are ferocious. And these are said to be enlightened beings, not just some worldly deities or in a bad mood. And so it's taking that energy, which is the mental affliction of hatred, and transmuting it into something that in fact empowers you on the path to enlightenment and purifies the mental afflictions along the way. Okay, it's very high-tech, very kind of an alchemical approach. And Milarepa was thoroughly trained in that by his teacher Marpa. So he's going to take that malevolent dark force that he had mastered earlier, which was dark and used as dark, and he's going to use that now and transmute it under the guise and with the motivation of the Dharma that he learned from Milarepa. And so he's going to use that. He's directly confronted by the white magic. That dark is directly confronted by the white magic of the Buddha Dharma, which can accommodate and purify, transmute the dark. Having challenged the demons, Milarepa arose and rushed with great confidence directly at them. So this is where the story comes to an end. You can imagine he wasn't just kind of rushing at them as a skinny little yogi. He's going to be rushing at them in a way that's going to terrify them. Probably Mahakala is a pretty good guess. So Milarepa rose and rushed them with great confidence directly at them. They shrank in terror, rolling their eyes and trembling violently, and then swirled together into a single vision and dissolved. With this, the activity of ferocity was completed, and Milarepa, the black sorcerer, was reclaimed by Milarepa, the white sorcerer. He took that violence, the malevolence, the hostility, ferocity, transmuted it into something where in fact there was no harm. But the demons that were apparitions of his own mind were dispelled. And that's the end of the story. Okay. I think it's a much more interesting story. And so, interpretation. I'm going to just spend a bit of time on this. I don't have the right interpretation. I just look at a story and try to interpret it in a way that's most meaningful for me. I think we've all heard of the 5 obscurations, right? Which, when we're practicing shamatha, they may arise in ways that seem very demonic, with eyes as big as saucers. And they taunt us, they challenge us, they ridicule us. They really make our lives very difficult, right? And all of them do, don't they? On different occasions, in different ways, of course. But demon of hedonic fixation, completely taking us away from Dharma, throwing us out in the sea of samsara. This real malevolent demon of ill will, malevolence, hostility, makes our life just hell, right? Laxity and dullness, which just sends us into a stupor. Excitation and anxiety never gives us any rest, no peace of mind. But I'm going to linger only on the last one, because I think it's relevant for people here. Not only one or two, probably more than that. Afflictive uncertainty. A lot of the teachings here, no one, certainly not I, expects anyone here listening by podcast or here in Tuscany to simply be accepting everything I'm saying. That would be kind of missing the whole point. Oh, Alan said it, must be true, I believe. Boy, would that be missing the whole point, right? It wouldn't even help you. Just to believe all this stuff and then go home. Hey, honey, I have brought home a lot more beliefs than I left home with. Good. Put them in the garage. The house is full. Put them in the garage. We'll find some storage for them someplace. Useless. So, of course, when our beliefs or assumptions, let alone the beliefs and assumptions of many hundreds of millions of people around us, including highly intelligent, very educated people, when we're challenging their beliefs and assumptions, well, we shouldn't do so casually. Especially, many of us have been educated into those assumptions, beliefs, and so forth, if we've had any kind of science education at all. But also in the humanities. When I was studying religious studies at Stanford University, the one thing you never do is take a religious approach to religious studies. We studied Marx, we studied Freud, we studied materialist deconstructions, anthropological deconstructions, sociological deconstructions, psychological deconstructions, economic deconstructions, atheistic deconstructions. You had to study all of that, and then write papers on it, of all of the ways that people completely try to deconstruct and discredit religion. That was part of our education. And if you ever write a doctoral thesis in which you appear to be championing Buddhism in a secular university, good luck with that. It's not how it's done. You're supposed to take an objective stance, and if that's completely materialistic, that's perfectly fine. But for heaven's sakes, don't take a Buddhist stance, because then you've lost your objectivity. Okay, I won't linger on there. But when we encounter views such as Mount Meru may actually exist for starters, and all the other ones, just the notion that phenomena don't exist from their own side, let alone Mount Meru, just that one. What? It's only right that uncertainty arises. If it doesn't, then either we are just brilliant and see right through the essence, or we're just lazy. and just accepting it because somebody else said so. And the Buddha expressly encouraged people not to do that. Mere hearsay, my teacher said, it's written in a great sutra or some other scripture and so forth. And so when uncertainty, so let's follow here. For anybody experiences afflictive uncertainty, about anything, not just about a Buddha Dharma, about your own abilities to practice and really progress and deeply benefit from Shamatha, Vipashyana, the four immeasurables, and so forth. Can you really get benefit, or are you pretty much just stuck right where you are? And this is always a window dressing, just icing on a really nasty cake. You know? Do you have any confidence in yourself to really proceed along the path, to reach the path, proceed along the path? Afflictive uncertainty, of course, arises, and for good reason. You know, we are not evidently surrounded by Arya Bodhisattvas, and people. We don't have caves. We don't have the caves of Tuscany filled with, highly accomplished yogis who have achieved jhana. If they are, they're keeping a good secret. So of course, afflictive uncertainty arises. And so when you're resting there and settling the mind in its natural state, or you're just walking along, minding your own business, and some afflictive uncertainty with eyes as big as saucers comes and starts to harass you, grimacing and growling and menacing, well, you could say, would you please leave? And maybe they will, if it's really a wimpy, mental, afflictive uncertainty. Oh gosh, well now you ask me, well, of course I'll leave. Could happen, not too likely. And so if it persists, you may try to give it a good Dharma talk. Good luck with that. Or develop loving kindness and compassion for uncertainty. It really doesn't make any sense at all. They'll laugh at you. But to examine it closely, to acknowledge afflictive uncertainty as uncertainty, and then confront, engage, invite them to stay, and have a conversation. Apply two of the jhana factors, more general course investigation, subtle analysis. Cut through it. You don't have to drown them out, scream at them until they go, but engage them within a duel of wits, a duel of intelligence, and see who wins. Right? If you win, you see the afflictive uncertainty come up, you bring your full intelligence out, and to your satisfaction, because you're the judge of the duel, not me or somebody else, if you engage with the afflictive uncertainty and you cut it right down and you say, I've just finished with you, right? It can happen. I've moved through a lot of uncertainties I've had over the years. We all do. If it still comes back after it's beaten in a fair fight, then scare the crap out of it. This word I really want to have introduced into English because it's so good. It sounds like a swear word and it's not. Basta! It sounds like it should be, you use one of those 6-letter words. But it's really good. Like, we've had our conversation, I've won, basta! Beat it! I'm finished. You have nothing more to say here. And if you want to manifest as Mahakala, that should be just fine. But only after you've won the debate. Or maybe it was a really good doubt. And it was doubting something where your understanding was in fact flawed. In which case, you welcome them in. That was I'm so glad I doubted that. Otherwise, I would have been complacent in a misunderstanding. Okay? And in the midst of all of that, to recognize that each of those 5 mental afflictions is not inherently existent. That would be very helpful.